Hey YouTube, this is the LTD Magnum up here on the stand. I recently purchased some red transmission springs for the first gear clutch on this 2-speed here. I recently put a yellow spring in this a couple weeks ago and it's been running pretty good, but looking for a little bit more slip off the line and just better performance, and kind of just seeing what happens when I put the most powerful spring in the ZA. Going to be step by step on disassembling the transmission partially, as well as the process that I use to knock out the links and replace the spring. Hope you enjoy. So the first step of this process is going to be draining the transmission fluid. On this bike I have a promo which kind of partially blocks access to the drain plug. So I've kind of laid out some, besides just the funnel here to capture the oil, I've just laid out an old rag to capture anything that might float off. As you can see, kind of as expected, it's basically just completely dripping out of the pipe, so we'll just make sure to clean that up before we start this thing back up. You're going to want to let this drain as much as possible, since we're going to be working inside the transmission. Sorry if you don't get all of it out. Basically, just expect some leakage of transmission fluid when you take the cover off later. I'm going to call that good enough, and I'm actually going to put that in later. Just don't forget to... The next step is going to be taking off the transmission cover here. If your ZA hasn't been opened before, these are probably flatheads, in which I highly recommend using a manual impact driver. So once you get everything out, to take the actual cover off, again, if it's kind of stuck on, the best way to do this is to use a rubber mallet and kind of start smacking it. What you don't want to do is use a flathead and start prying it, because that can damage the case and cause sealing problems in the future. If you really have to, you can lightly tap it with a rag and a hammer, just very lightly if you don't have a mallet on you. Mine seems to most likely need that. Don't do this at home, kids. Alright, so I did end up getting it off. It just took quite a while with softly hitting with the hammer with that rag. Would probably have better luck if you had like a piece of wood around to help smack it with. Something I want to mention too is you want to be very careful not to rip or break this gasket. I'm going to take, actually I'm just going to leave this here for now. Another thing to note when you take this out is take a look inside and see if any of the shims came out with it. And as you can see in this case, we got this guy here, which is this capper cover for this guy. So I'm gonna lay that down, and you can see I got this shim right here as well. I'm gonna leave that there for now and put it on the side just so I know where it came from. Alright, so our clutches that we need to get to are inside of this bell here. But to get to that first, we have to remove this gear here. And this one's really tricky because, number one, this is a reverse thread nut here, so be very cautious not to attempt to do, use a regular lefty-loosey on this, otherwise you risk breaking things or damaging things. Then number two is that this nut is extremely tight from the factory. When I first took it apart, I think it took me like 30 seconds with an impact before it came loose. The method I use for this is a 15mm socket. If you look at the manufacturer repair manual, they do have a factory tool that locks on the other side on the sprocket, which allows you to use a regular wrench on this guy. There's also a hack of using like a 10mm socket and jamming in between that sprocket on the other side, but I've found that just using an impact is good enough. Another really important thing here is that when you take this nut off, if you just allow it to come off and quickly move away, all of these roller bearings are going to come flying out at you or on the floor. So what I like to do is kind of push out with this while you take off the nut, and that way all of these roller bearings are going to stay put. Did forget about this little shim here on the right side here on this clutch bell. Don't lose that. I'm gonna now carefully move this out, and as you can see, they are all intact and none of them are on the floor. So next we can take off the clutch bell here. Note that there is a shim here. Okay, last thing we need to do to take these off is there is this final nut here. This is regular thread, and there's also this kind of locking washer that you have to tap out, and to do that I just use a flathead and a hammer. Alright, final nut here. Like I said, this is a 24 mil socket. I have this deep socket to reach, which you will most likely need as well. So now your first speed or first gear clutch should come off now. There you go. So while you're here, if this is the first time opening up your ZA, your second speed clutch here might be in the stock position. What you're seeing here is the flip position. Highly recommend this mod because it's going to delay your shift from first into second to about 20 to 25 miles an hour depending on kind of your setup, and it's also going to allow you to blip shift your bike.